This is Suburban On Air and Cohen in the City. Here is Mike Cohen.
I'd think of myself as an attorney for the damned.
Pound for pound, the best lawyer I know.
One of the top defense attorneys in the country.
A ferocious litigator and advocate.
The most famous lawyer of his generation.
He delights in picking the one that everyone hates.
He would have represented Hitler.
Some people call him a showboat, but when the chips are down, a lot of people call him
Professor Dershowitz. How good of you to come.
Well, the Canadian premiere of The Trials of Alan Dershowitz will take place on Thursday, April 25th, 7 p.m. at the SEV Cinema of Concordia University as part of the Blue Metropolis Festival. And Alan Dershowitz is one of the globe's most famous defense lawyers. And for the 150th episode of my Cohen in the City video program, I was looking for something special, and along comes my old friend John Curtin, who we go back to his CBC days. And what does he do? He delivers me Alan Dershowitz joining us for this episode. So first off, John, like I said, we go back to when you were a reporter for CBC, and I was working at the time at the Canadian Jewish Congress. And I watched, you were able to get me this film, so I've seen it in advance. It's a work of art. It's a fantastic piece. How did this all come about that you got connected to Alan Dershowitz to do a film like this?
Well, about 10 years ago, just when Alan was leaving Harvard University, retiring from teaching, I did a 8-minute profile on him for another film called Why the Jews. And I was just astonished in talking to Alan that no one had done a biography of him. I thought there would be many Americans would have jumped on the opportunity to record his life story, and they hadn't. So a few years later, when I'd finished the film Why the Jews, I thought the next one's going to be on Alan.
And Alan, and you've asked me to call you Alan because I was going to call you Mr. Dershowitz. Like, what do you want people to learn about you when they see this film?
Well, the reason Americans haven't made a film about me is I am simply too controversial. As a criminal defense lawyer and a civil libertarian, everybody hates me. They hate me because I don't necessarily support their political views. Take the whole Trump issue. I'm against Trump. I'm not a Trump supporter. I voted against him twice, but I support his civil liberties and his constitutional rights. So the pro-Trump people hate me because I don't vote for him. The anti-Trump people hate me because I defend his civil liberties. That's just a paradigm of how my life has gone. And don't expect, if you're going to be a criminal defense lawyer or an honest civil libertarian, to make friends. You can have a few friends who understand you and support you. And John was one of the few people who really got it. He really understood where I came from. He understood how I could be anti-Trump and pro-Trump at the same time, depending on which aspect of Trump we're looking at. The same was true of virtually all of my clients over time. Going back to my defense of like pornography, I defended the film I Am Curious Yellow and Deep Throat. I myself hate pornography. And if it were all to disappear from the face of the earth, I would be thrilled. And I hate Nazis. And yet I defended the rights of Nazis to speak and march in Skokie. My mother called me and said, "What side are you on, the Nazis or the Jews?" On the side of the Constitution. She says, "I'm your mother. Don't talk like that to me. You have to pick sides, Jews or Nazis." So I don't pick sides. And it takes somebody like John Curtin to really understand what motivates me and what makes me so controversial.
John, this had to be a dream opportunity to follow Alan Dershowitz for all those years and do this film.
Yeah, it absolutely was. And I must say, Alan was incredibly generous with his time, and he did just about anything I asked him, including he let us film him shaving in the morning in his bathroom.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was terrific working with him. I feel like I got at least one free semester at Harvard Law School. So I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah.
But Alan, looking at the film, I mean, I've followed your career obviously for decades, but if we look at O.J. Simpson, Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, you just mentioned, Klaus von Bülow, you've really represented some of the most controversial people of our time. And based on the bite back you got, if you had to do it all over again, are there any of those people that you would have say, you know what, if I could go back in time and time travel, I wouldn't do it?
Yes, the only one is Jeffrey Epstein, because as a result of the Jeffrey Epstein case, I was falsely accused of having sex with some 19-year-old I never met. I've been utterly faithful to my wife all these years. Since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein, I haven't touched another woman, but this woman decided to falsely accuse me. Ultimately, she admitted that she may have misidentified me and confused me with somebody else and withdrew all the charges. But you wouldn't know that. I spoke at Cardozo Law School 2 weeks ago about Israel, and the front several rows were radical anti-Israeli people at Cardozo Law School, Yeshiva University Law School, and they were holding signs, Dershowitz, child rapist, child molester. And I explained to them that, she had withdrawn all of her charges. She admitted that she may have confused me and made a mistake about me. That didn't matter. I was pro-Israel, and so they were going to accuse me of rape. But that, hurt my reputation, hurt my family. Of course, my family won't. That I'm one of these people who doesn't even hug anybody, so I've never touched a woman since the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. But I wish I hadn't taken that case. It caused my family too much distress. I'm happy to have defended him on the merits, but I'm happy I did the Donald Trump case, even though it lost me friends, and the Klaus von Bülow case, Mike Tyson, the Pentagon Papers, Julian Assange. That's what a criminal lawyer does. One of my heroes, of course, is John Adams, because he defended those British soldiers accused of the Boston Massacre during the height of the fervor over the American Revolution. And he was despised and hated by everybody. And Abraham Lincoln defended people who were despised and hated. And so did Thurgood Marshall and Clarence Thomas. And I'm sure there's a list of Canadian lawyers who would also fill the same pantheon of bravery to defend the most despised. Look, it starts with Abraham in the Bible, defending the sinners of Saddam, saying to God, Chalila lacha, God forbid, you, the judge of all the universe, shall not do justice. So, I have a lot of people in whose footsteps I follow, starting from Abraham to John Adams to Abraham Lincoln. So I think I'm in the right tradition, but most people don't understand it. They want you as a lawyer to defend only people they approve of. Would they apply the same standard to emergency room doctors? My daughter-in-law is an emergency room doctor. Should she only treat people who people like? Of course. I always tell the story. This is a true story. I was a close friend of a policeman in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And one day he was shot along with the man who he was trying to arrest. They were both shot by each other, and they were both rushed to the emergency ward of the hospital. And I happened to run to the hospital because my friend was shot. And they decided to treat the killer, the criminal, before they treated the policeman, because the killer, the bad guy, was more seriously injured. And so the doctors made a decision. They're not going to decide who to treat based on who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, but based on medical considerations. And that's, for me, a very important analogy to the legal system. I represent the most despised, the most hated, sometimes the most guilty. The vast majority of Canadians and Americans who are charged with crime are guilty. Thank God for that. Would you want to live in a country where the majority of people charged with crime are innocent? Fine. Move to Iran, move to China, move to Cuba, move to Russia, move to North Korea. But in our democratic countries, the majority of people are guilty, and we have to defend them in order to keep it that way. Otherwise, slide to a situation where prosecutors will go after innocent people.
Yes. Boy, what a great analogy. John, how did you get it down to, I guess it's about a little bit more than an hour and a half? How many hours did you have to chop? Because I'm sure it was all brilliant material.
It was the film that took me the longest to edit. I spent 2,000 hours editing it.
Oh my.
I should mention my good friend Paul Carvalho, a former Neiman
Yes,
fellow.
the late Paul
Harvard, who
Carvalho.
met
Yeah.
Alan in 1995 before I'd met him, and we worked together on the story. It was a very complex story, and we had to weave Alan's private life in with the trials. So it was an enormous but very, very interesting edit. I loved every minute of it. It's been a huge privilege to work with Alan and to listen to him and to be constantly surprised by what he says.
Alan, so you represented Donald Trump. You're not a political supporter of his. I saw Larry David in the film, who was a friend of yours, and we know he can't stand Trump. Has Trump called you? Have you spoken to him in recent years at all?
Not since I defended him. He used to call me all the time when he was president. And I'll give you one example. One day, it was July 3rd, just before we celebrated Independence Day in America. My whole family was with me on Martha's Vineyard, and the phone rings. Alan, it's Donald. He was, my instinct was to say, Donald who? But I said, no, you. And he asked me if I would get on a plane in 2 hours and meet with the Emir of Qatar and try to persuade him not to oppose what was going on at that time, the development of what became known as the Abraham Accords. And I got on an airplane and I had dinner with Donald Trump and with the Emir of Qatar, brother, and I did persuade him not to oppose the Abraham Accords. So he used to call me very frequently on Israeli-related matters and other civil liberties matters. Since he left the presidency, it's been rare. I get complaints, however, through third parties all the time. Why do you have to say you're voting against me? Why can't you just be quiet? Well, I think it's important to know that the reason I'm defending him is not political. It has to do with the Constitution and the rule of law.
He comes across to everybody as completely unhinged, and right now, I don't know what to say when I see him, but what's he like as a person, one-on-one? Is he a nice person?
He could be very generous and very nice. He's, obviously we know he's very self-centered, and even when I had dinner with the Emir of Qatar, and I'm trying to persuade the Emir, to do the right thing on the Abraham Accords, he leans over and says, Alan, why don't your people vote for me? And Mr. President, first of all, I don't have any people.
Yeah.
Jewish people vote based on, a variety of issues, not just Israel, abortion, gay rights, climate control. And, we continue to converse that way, but he doesn't understand why he doesn't get the complete support of the entire Jewish community. And he doesn't understand why I am not a strong supporter of his, because I am a strong supporter of Israel. And on Israel, he's been better than presidents and other candidates. And by the way, I have an open mind. I never decide who I'm going to vote for in a future election until just before the election. I want to see what the world. I want each party and each candidate to earn my vote. So I'm anything, but my presumption for 60 years since I voted for John Kennedy has always been to vote Democrat. But that could change. I speak to Erwin Cutler all the time. He is a lifelong liberal. He's not thrilled. I don't want to quote him, but he's not particularly thrilled with the current prime minister's views toward Israel. Right. And everybody in the pro-Israel community is having difficulty these days with the hard left. Just before he died, I was working with Joe Lieberman on a joint statement about how we had an open mind concerning this election. So this election is a bellwether for many pro-Israel Democrats.
Mike, do you have a moment for Alan to talk about the astonishing fact that as a young man, as a 30-something, a young professor, he was called in to consult on the War Measures Act with Pierre Trudeau?
I didn't know that.
The first time I really met Pierre Trudeau was through Irwin. Irwin was then working for the Attorney General of Canada, and they invited me to come up to Montebello, I think it was, where they had a 3 or 4 day conference on the civil liberties and human rights aspects of the War Measures Act. And I came and met with all the leaders and gave them my advice, and then wrote a long article about it. It shows any country, when pressed to extremes. Here we had assassinations and threats from the radical groups. And in my view, Canada went too far and kept the War Measures Act too long, and allowed it to apply in areas where there wasn't a threat. For example, in Vancouver, people were arrested under the War Measures Act unnecessarily. So every country overreacts. The United States overreacted terribly to the Pearl Harbor when we confined 110,000 Japanese Americans in camps. The British overreacted. It's the most natural thing when you face danger to overreact. The Israelis react. So it's important to calibrate to make sure that the rule of law ultimately governs all actions done by any government.
I have to ask you one last question, and that is O.J. Simpson. You represented him. He just passed away. Were you in communication with him at all in the last 10 years, let's say?
Just very sporadically. He would call me sometimes for legal advice. The interesting thing about the O.J. Simpson case is, even for those people who know for certain that he was guilty, and there are many people who believe that, the evidence was overwhelming against him. The evidence was also overwhelming that one piece of evidence at the very least was planted. The police tampered with the evidence. They poured blood, the blood of O.J. Simpson and one of his alleged victims, on a sock that they found. And we caught them because the blood contained a chemical not found in the human body, but found in test tubes. So there you have a situation where for some people, they framed a guilty man. And that's a paradox that a lot of people don't understand either. How can you frame somebody who's guilty? Well, you can. You can try to enhance the evidence. We caught them, and that's the reason we won the case.
Fascinating, John. I mean, I want to thank you, John, for making this interview possible, because Alan Dershowitz, definitely somebody who was on my bucket list of interviews, and I never thought it would happen. So I'm thrilled. And John, good luck with the film. And Alan, you want to say a parting word?
I do. I just want to thank John because, he did such a phenomenal job. He made me better than I am, and showed the flaws and the defects. I mean, it's a balanced film, and I didn't have any control essentially over what he put in it and didn't put in it. So when I saw it for the first time, I was surprised also. And from an artistic point of view, it's a very, very good film. And I hope people will watch it, and I hope people will understand me and the complexity and nuances of my life a little bit better than they do from just reading headlines.
All right. No,
thanks a lot, Alan. I appreciate that. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I'm going to miss all those interviews and talking to you.
I have a, go ahead.
I think we ought to add 10 minutes to the film based on what's happened in Israel since that happened. And so I'm happy to sit down with you. And, I just came back from Israel, where I met with the prime minister twice, with the president, with the head of the Mossad, with the head of all the military. I lectured at the military college. And I think that an additional 10 minutes might be interesting in terms of bringing it up to date, because I care so deeply about what's going on in the Middle East. But even if the film stands just the way it is, it obviously reflects all of my points of views, and people could extrapolate from the current film to understand what I would be saying about the situation in the Middle East today.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought that up. So thank you both for joining me on the Suburban On Air. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with the premiere and the festival circuit.
Thanks, Mike.
Great having Alan Dershowitz and John Curtin as my guest.